Hi, I'm Bianca Enriquez, here to report on the production of Nike shoes. In today's society, having the best of the best is a must for many, especially with younger generations. Nike is a popular brand of shoes and is now one of the most profitable companies. Not only do they produce shoes, but they produce clothes, so popular that people are willing to pay hundreds of dollars for the product. Basically, Nike is the world's largest seller of athletic footwear and apparel. People will literally line up overnight at the chance of getting the latest style and design. There is no denying how in high demand Nike shoes are. Cold cement is the technique used by the Nike company to make their shoes. Cold cement shoe construction allows the use of modern lightweight plastic, foam, and mesh materials due to the low temperature required for bonding the upper shoe to the shoe sole. Moving on to the concept of competitive markets, which Nike participates in as a producer. Nike's top competitors are Adidas and Under Armour, with the next most profitable sales in shoes and apparel in comparison to Nike. Competitive markets are the best to have, and even with the competition, Nike still maintains high profits. In the very beginning, the company Nike was called Blue Ribbon Sports. The company began in 1964 in Beaverton, Oregon. Bill Bowerman and Phil McKnight were the co-founders of Nike. Bowerman was inspired by his wife's wealth iron to make a shoe that would give runners additional traction and grip. Nike made its debut from the back of McKnight's car. The swoosh was created in 1971 by a university student that went by the name of Caroline Davidson. For a mere $35, the swoosh was sold. The first person Nike endorsed was Steve Prefontaine, America's best-known track and field athlete, at just the age of 22. Today, Nike endorses Kevin Durant, Michael Jordan, Cristiano Ronaldo, LeBron James, and many other public figures. In 2014, Nike products made a profit of $2.78 billion. Nike has grown so much since its start that it now owns the shoe brand Converse. Nike has become such a massive corporation that it has its shoes being produced at over 700 different factories all over the world. Nike, in most recent years, has also received some backlash over its practices happening overseas. There has been major protests in some Asian countries where Nike has contracts with factories.
Okay, so the main players responsible for the production of Nike are the consumers, the factory owners, and the factory workers, which are a bunch of factories in Vietnam, China, Indonesia, Thailand, Pakistan, and Malaysia. Other important players are people in charge of the company, like the CEO Mark Parker, CFO Andrew Campion, and then also Chairman Phil Knight. Why the production of Nike is important is because since they don't really own any factories in developed countries and have only contracts with them, they use that argument to not take any responsibility of the harsh conditions of workers by saying we are just the buyers. And a report funded by Nike found that workers in Indonesia were suffering from harsh working conditions. Workers reported that they were bullied, forced to work overtime, and had little access to healthcare. So many workers were also exposed to low wages and long working hours. There were reports that workers were pressured into sex by managers as well. To me, this is an example of a sweatshop. More than 4,000 workers were interviewed and mentioned there have been cases where people have collapsed because they were not allowed access to any factory clinics. This is important to focus on since many companies do take their businesses outside of the U.S. it does come at a humane cost. When companies outsource, that means that not only is the U.S. losing jobs, but it also the workers in developing countries are being exploited for profit.
So, who is affected by the production of Nike shoes? I believe it is every single one of us. Most of us either don't know or know very little of the production of Nike shoes. We all need to be aware of how these shoes are being made because it will have a huge effect on the factory workers' lives. There was an article that I read from the Los Angeles Times that stated there are over 700 factories. That makes sense since Nike has a huge production. With all these factories, though, comes the thousands of workers. If nobody pays attention to the production of Nike shoes, we are letting them proceed to take advantage of those factory workers. So, how is this all relevant? If most people start paying attention to the production of Nike shoes, it won't only bring awareness to the factory workers' lives linked with Nike, but also other factory workers across the entire world. Looking back at the Los Angeles Times article again, there was a quote that stated the report noted problems including falsification of factory documents such as payroll records, lack of effective grievance systems for disgruntled workers, and hiring practices that did not ensure minimum age standards. I'm pretty sure if we are seeing all these conditions in a company such as Nike, many other companies are just going to be following in their footsteps. Okay, so what does this tell us about ourselves? If people know about how Nikes are being produced and don't do anything, do they really care about others? We are all human, and if we do not care about how not only the workers of Nikes, but around the world are being treated, are we really being humane? We need to be thoughtful of one another. If this were happening in America, people would not have it and start to rebel. Americans today can barely sustain their daily lives earning minimum wage, so imagine the factory workers getting below the minimum wage. We need to start taking an initiative. The Nike brand is known all over the world. These stores in various locations across the world and websites you can buy their products from, thus causing us to get any of their products at any moment. According to the Statista website, so far in 2016, Nike has earned around $32 billion globally. With all this money, they should be putting it back into the economy, giving it to workers for more incentive. If Nike paid their workers a better wage, this could affect the way other companies do their business. Right now, the world is taking a blind eye to the factory workers' conditions. We all need to take recognition that there are many problems that we are faced, and this is one of them.
The production of Nike shoes creates a global network that has numerous countries working together to create their product. Some countries provide the raw materials that then ship those materials to factories in other countries who will put the materials together. The final product is then shipped around the world as a Nike shoe. These aspects are greatly unknown by the American consumer. The good and the bad of the company is bypassed purely for the product due to our high materialistic nature. Unless these issues are brought to life, we will never grow as global citizens. The main people that are responsible for these issues are, of course, Nike itself. They need to take ownership of their company. Even though they don't own the factories that are creating their products, their name is still affiliated with that factory, and their Nike swoosh is coming out of them. So they need to understand that problems are happening in their factories and take ownership and use their resources to create that change. Another responsibility has to be placed on the consumer. Due to our high materialistic nature, we are having such high demand for these Nike products without knowing the consequences of creating these products. Nike has been brought into the light by social media on these issues in the past numerous times, and their unwillingness to make proper accommodations, adjustments, and changes for their factory workers should bring an alarm to their consumers. because they should see these bad things happening and want to make a change, yet they're not. The media light that has been put on Nike in the past should cause their consumers to want to demand changes for how their product is being made. The biggest impact of the production of Nike shoes has to be placed on the workers. The workers are the ones that are suffering through all of this low pay, bad factory conditions. They are having poor work conditions where they're putting their health and their physical and mental health at risk to be working in these factories, and they're making such low wages. They're in some cases they're making above minimum wage for their country, but that's poverty level. They're still not making a living wage. If a husband and wife were working in a factory together, they would not make enough money to support a child, which is not comfortable to live at. As well, before 1999, female factory workers would make even below poverty level pay for their beginning pay because they would need to be trained, even though their training may take only a few hours before they're put out on the factory line. So that has changed since then, but little change has been made to create a living wage for their factory workers. Consumers are also highly impacted by the production of Nike shoes. The corporation makes around $13 to $16 to make each shoe, while the consumer is paying on average of $70 to $120. And if you're buying, I think it was Jordans, can cost anywhere between $250 to $550 for a $16 pair of shoe. Their consumers are paying approximately 70% more than Nike is paying to make the shoe. With this high margin of profit that the Nike company has, they're unwilling to make these necessary changes for their factory workers to be in safe and working environments. They have the capacity, the resources, everything that they need to make this change, yet they're unwilling to do so. If Nike makes changes towards their factory workers, that can change the shoemaking company in the long run.
Since living in a developed country with minimum wage and modern working conditions, do you guys believe that Nike should take responsibility for the exploitation of workers in the developing countries?